Today we're going to start Unit 5. That's Chapter 24 and 25. So the way we're going to learn those two are not going to be just finish one chapter and then start the second. Today's lecture is exclusive on Chapter 24, but the next lecture, the next two lectures, we're going to have a mixture of rearrange the sequence. We go through different parts of chapter 24 and 25, actually combine some of the chapter 24 content with and put it into chapter 25. And so then it's more streamlined. But then today's is mainly we're going to have an overview of urinary system and to talk about different components of the kidney, right? And how they work together and perform the main function of the kidney, which is to form urine. So let's have a look of what's made out of urinary system. So essentially, this is the main organs of urinary system. Two kidneys, right? Think about which one is left, which one is right. And I have this question for you. Those two are not right on the same level. So one is more inferior than the other. Which one is more inferior? Then additionally, other than the kidneys, you have the urinary bladder here, down here, right? And then you that's basically for store to store the urine. And then you have a ureter, you connecting a kidney to one side of the urinary bladder. So you have two ureters because you have two kidneys. Then when you also need to have a passage for the urine to get out of your body, right, to be eliminated, and that will be called urethral. So the urethral are going to be different between female and male. So the anatomic structures are involved are going to be slightly different. We're going to talk about the difference in detail when we get to urethral. But this is the anterior view, right? When then you have a posterior view here, showing you how the anatomic position between them. So have you figured out which kidney is more inferior than the other? Okay, so that should be, this is the right side. Right? This is kind of review how you can tell left from right. So this is the transverse section of the abdominal cavity at the level of kidney. So you can see the two kidneys here. They are actually, you can see they're wrapped around by adipose tissue, right? So they are called paranephric fat. They kind of support the kidney. But you can also see the relative anatomic position of kidney to the rest of the abdominal organs. You have liver here, you have stomach right there on the left side and here, right? And you have spleen right here to the left of the left kidney. You have here, you have some large intestine here too, and pancreas. So it's a pretty kind of a crowded region right here. Here is to show you, if you remember, most of the abdominal cavity digestive tracts are in the peritoneum. That means they are wrapped around by serous membrane, and so they are in the you have them in the peritoneal cavity. So you have the parietal layer of the peritoneum lining the body wall, right? And that's actually the posterior portion of the parietal peritoneal is actually right here to the surface of the kidney, anterior surface of the kidney. So the green highlighted region here is considered as intraperitoneal within the peritoneal cavity. And so any organ that's not in the peritoneal cavity, therefore is considered as retroperitoneal because they are posterior. This is the anterior side, right? So they are posterior to the peritoneal. And kidney is retroperitoneal. Okay. So not only kidney, actually ureters are peritoneal, retroperitoneal, as well as the urinary bladder is also retroperitoneal. So that means the outermost of the layer of the peritoneum, of the kidney, ureter, and bladder, that would be that layer of the loose connective tissue would be adventitious, right? Would be called adventitia, not serosa, because they are not wrapped by the serous membrane. We all know the main function of urinary system is to generate urine. But what is urine, right? Why do we need to generate to form urine? Well, that's basically our way to eliminate by a metabolic waste from our blood. So the metabolic waste, such as are included such things like nitrogenous kind of waste, such as urea and uric acid and related products giving you that smell of the urine. But also some of the biologically active molecules such as hormones and drugs can also be eliminated through this through kidney through urine. So therefore, a major function is, how to get those metabolic wastes and toxins and hormones out of blood. We do that by kidney go through this process of filtering blood. So when we talk about in the lymphatic system, right, we said one of the organs, right, remember, filters blood, the other filters lymph. And I remember back then, one of you guys asked me, how about kidney, right? Because kidney also filters blood. But we are talking about filter blood for different purposes, right? For the lymphatic system, the organ is spleen, filters blood to eliminate, pathogens, any, abnormal cells, right? So that's basically defending ourselves against any pathogen or anything could cause disease, right? And from the blood. But for the urinary system, the kidney filters blood is to get rid of the metabolic wastes. So yes, they both filters blood, but you can consider the filter they used, right? What they try to get out of the blood is different. So that's the first major function. But in addition, kidney has major function in regulating ion level or electrolyte levels, and regulating of the acid-base balance. So those two we're going to mainly talk about in chapter 5. We actually combine part of chapter 25. We combine part of chapter 24 talking about how those electrolytes are absorbed or secreted in the chapter 25 in the context of regulating the electrolyte level balance. And it also have major function in regulating blood pressure. We're going to talk about that. Well, part of it, if you still remember, was through the generation of secretion of renin. And if you still remember about, different hormones that regulating blood pressure, renin is the major limiting step, right, to the enzyme to for the angiotensin 2 hormone function. So we call it angiotensin 2 renin system. And renin is secreted by kidney. And it is also the urinary system is involved in the formation of calcitrin. That's a hormone increase calcium absorption. In addition, it also involves in regulating the red blood cell level. So it can sense the red blood cell or erythrocyte level in the blood, and therefore, if there's a need, there is going to produce and release erythropoietin, which is a hormone promoting erythrocyte formation in the red bone marrow. But the secretion of this hormone is by kidney. We all know we only need one healthy kidney really to be able to function normally, right? So there are some kidney variations. You could have only one kidney when the other one failed to develop, or you could have three kidneys, but all of them are normal, right? But you wouldn't usually have symptoms if that kidney is healthy. So sometimes the shape of the kidney could be changed, right? You have fusion of the left and right kidney, or you could have, the developed kidney to like a kind of the position is low. All of that, as long as the kidneys working correctly, that shouldn't you normally wouldn't have symptoms developing from those abnormalities. However, if you due to loss of adipose tissue, remember you have adipose tissue surrounding kidneys and keep them in place, but if you lost dramatic portion of those adipose tissue results in, the kidney drop lower in your abdominal cavity. That could actually kink the ureter, block the urine flow, and backs up the urine to the kidney, causing swelling of the kidney, and that's hyporeferosis, right? That can lead to renal failure. So that's this condition is called renal ptosis. So let's first look at the cross section of kidney. As you can see here, it has a cortex, it has a medulla, and it has a hilum, right? Is where the concave surface is where the renal artery and renal vein, right, coming in, carries the blood circulation in and out of the kidney. It's also where the ureter collect urine from kidney. You can see throughout of the kidney, you have the arteries and veins travel together and branched out and providing the blood circulation to the kidney. Because kidney filters blood, so the functional unit of nephron, which is the filtration unit, also goes hand in hand with the blood vessels. So the renal corpuscle portion and most of its tubules actually localized to the cortex of the kidney, whilst the kidney loop, the nephron loop, usually deep into the medulla. You're also you'll basically see how can the corpuscle here, right, wrap around capillary bed of the artery that forms by the arterioles, right? So you have, so you can, I think the best way actually I can think about to describe this is, imagine you have in one hand, in your left hand, you're holding a baseball. Okay, so that your hand is this arterioles. Then you have arterioles, right? Your hand is essentially this vascular pole holding a baseball, and that's the arterioles form the glomerulus. That's a kind of, actually glomerulus is kind of convoluted, capillaries formed by this arteriole. And then so that's your baseball. It's the glomerulus. Then you have your right hand holding the baseball glove and wrap around your left hand, right, with a baseball inside. So the glove is the glomerular capsule, the baseball glove, right? So you have your right hand is the tubular pole, right? So then you have those kind of, the one hand is equivalent to the capillary vessels. The other is the filtration unit. That's where actually the filtration happens. Is your baseball glove is what's called glomerular capsule. Okay, your baseball glove, you can imagine what the inner side of your baseball glove touches the baseball. Okay, so the outer side of the baseball glove, it touches everything else. So you have two layers of the glomerular capsule, the visceral layer and the parietal layer. The visceral layer, again, is the inside layer, is the one touches the glomerulus, and the parietal layer is the outermost layer. And in between those layers, then you have a capsular space, and that's where all those filtration is going to go, right? So the visceral layer of the glomerular capsule, right, is actually permeable, very permeable. So then that's basically what's the filter. And that is going to keep something inside of the blood, but in terms of the blood plasma, is very permeable to the blood plasma. So the formed element stays in, everything else can be filtered out, right? But it also keeps a lot of the big proteins inside. So the filtrate now generated by pushing through the filter, the permeable visceral layer, and gets into the capsular space. So that's the cavity that receives filtrate, right? And then in order to keep that filtrate to stay in the tubules, right? In the capsular space, you actually have to have the parietal layer impermeable. So then that's how you can keep the filtrate in the nephron. So that's the start of the nephron, is actually the glomerular capsule with the generation collecting the filtrate, right? And then the filtrate is going to travel down the renal tubules. So you have, coming out of the glomerular capsule, you have a convoluted set of renal tubules. So the part that's more proximal to the glomerular capsule is called proximal convoluted tube, or PCT. And then so it then goes deep into the medulla, and then coming back up. This is called a nephron loop, because you have then this loop has a descending limb, right, going down into the medulla, and then follows by ascending limb. That's the part that's coming out of the going up and then come out of the medulla and back into the cortex. So after the nephron loop, you are going to have another segment of the convoluted tubule, and that is called the DCT, the distal convoluted tubule. And you probably pay attention to this is the DCT is actually not further away physically from the capsule, because now the DCT tends to be right next to the capsule because it looped back, right? But then if you follow the passageway of the tubule, that is the distal part. So that's why it's called distal convoluted tubule. Then from the DCT, then the filtrate is going to then empty it into the collecting tubules, and that's going to collect all the filtrate that form in each one of those nephrons. So because this is only one unit, you could have thousands and tens of thousands of nephron in the kidney, all are doing filtration and formation of urine at the same time. So the connecting tubules, right, are going to start with smaller connecting tubules, and they're going to merge together and become bigger collecting duct, and they're going to empty it into the pelvis of the kidney, and then basically flow out. To summarize this part, right, nephron forms around the glomerulus, right? So you have the glomerulus is actually formed by the capillary vessels, is part of the blood circulation, right? And the filtration unit is the glomerular capsule surrounding the glomerulus, right? So that's where the filtration happens, where the filtrate are generated, right? The later all the other component of the nephron is to basically modify the filtrate and then form urine along the way. So we're going to go through this process one by one, but so that's the basic understanding, right? The glomerulus is a blood vessel, it's a capillary vessels, and the glomerular capsule is actually the filtration unit. So there are two types of nephrons in the kidney. One called cortical nephron, because the supermajority of the nephron is in the cortex. Only a small part of the nephron loop is in the medulla, versus the other type of nephron have the majority, can deep into the medulla, right? And so it's actually the nephrons, the other parts are right next to the juncture of the cortex and the medulla. That juncture is called cortical medullary junction, right? So both of them, the filtration part, the renal capsule part, capsicle part, right, are still in, and the PCT and DCT are all in the cortex, but this one is closer to the medulla, are deeply involved in the concentration gradients formed in the medulla, whereas the other one does not. Another thing I want to point to you in this diagram is, now you realize, right, the blood vessels, the blood circulation of the nephron, surrounding the nephron. It's not, we only in the last diagram talk about the glomerulus, right? That's the capillaries, where the filtration of the blood happens, right? It's the blood flowing out, plasma flowing out from those capillaries. But then so this is formed by arterial. So you have a afferent arterial feeding this capillary, but then coming out of the capillary bed is also a arterial. So that's called efferent arterial because it flows out, right? But then the blood is not actually going back to the renal arteries. Instead, it's actually going to circle around the arteriole is going to circle around the tubules, right? So you have the then not only the tubules but also running right next to the nephron loops. And so we are going to see there's two terminology associated with those blood vessels, right? Before then, so it's kind of this where the capillary beds are, right? So you have active, exchange of material between the blood and the tubule. And then after that, it's only after it's kind of circle around the whole tubule, then it's going to drain into the renal vein, becomes vein because it's becomes deoxygenated and drains into the vein. So the capillary vessels are here. It's very completed set of capillary vessels surrounding the nephron and its tubules. So if we extend the nephron and all its tubules, right, spread them out and deconvolute it a little bit, so this is what we ended up with. So this is a simplified version of what nephron looks like, but that's kind of giving you we're going to use this kind of diagram and go through every single part of the nephron. So you start again still, right, with the afferent arteriole, right, forms this capillary bed. It's fenestrated type of capillary bed, and the blood plasma could flow out, right, from this capillary bed, and the blood vessel is going to come out of the this capillary bed, still artery, still oxygenated blood. So they are still, it is still arterial, but then it's efferent arterial. And you can probably, oh, I forgot to mention in the last slide, this one, the afferent arteriole is always bigger in diameter than the efferent arteriole, right? So that's actually going to drive, because basically means you have more blood going into the glomerulus and less coming out of the glomerulus, right? So then you're increasing the blood pressure inside of the glomerulus. That's going to help the blood plasma going to filter out, get out of the capillaries, get into the capsular space that's formed by the capsular corpuscle, right? It forms the filtrate, and the filtrate is going to flow through the PCT, right? That's more proximal to the glomerulus, and then flow through the nephron loop, and then to the distal convoluted tubule, DCT, and drain into the collecting ducts. So this showing you the epithelial cells that actually line up the kidney tubules, right? They have a lot of microvilli on those surfaces, on the tubule surface, the apical surface facing the lumen of the tubule. Why is that? When we have microvilli on the surface of the epithelium, that's always trying to increase the surface area, right, for absorption. So that's exactly what we have here. So there's a lot of absorption happens in the tubules, in the tubule. For the nephron tube though, you actually have segments of it called thin segment, right? The epithelial tissue are squamous epithelium, not the cuboidal epithelium. The other ones are cuboidal. So they are here, right? So then on the distal DCT, the microvilli become fewer. There are still microvilli on those epithelial cells. And when you get to the connecting ducts are only some cells going to have the microvilli. And we are going to talk about what are the cells in the collecting duct collecting duct in the next lecture. So the overall, the structure of nephron are formed by the renal corpuscle, that's the first part, and then the renal tubule, that's where the tubules are.